Yeah, it was. But
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Download with Joe. Apologies if you've seen some technical difficulties over the last couple of weeks. We did say that might happen, but we're here now and excited to discuss partnerships across the smart buildings ecosystem. I'm Lewis Martin, founder of LMC, which is a climate technology business delivering talent solutions. Joe, want to introduce yourself quickly?
yeah, I'm a fractional head of product, employee, consultant focused on product and market strategy for smart building vendors, software solution vendors, and also firms that are focused on decarbonization of real estate assets. I work with the vendors typically to help them improve their product. I also work with the investors when they're looking to make investments or acquisitions, and I focus specifically on this space of decarbon digitization of real estate.
Nice. Very quickly, I mean, we've discussed it before when we were doing the pleasantries. You've obviously got a little bit of British heritage in your family.
Yep.
Is it coming home?
Yeah, I think to be quick, I think England actually has a good chance. I think they've been a little bit written off. I think all tournament this is the first game I think where they're not favored to win, but I think that they have been getting better and better, and they're starting to believe. And I think the tweaks that Southgate, their coach, has made are good. So I think they have a good chance. That said, it'll be by far the toughest game they've played all tournament.
Agreed. Yeah, it gives me anxiety thinking about it, to be honest. So
Yeah.
let's dive in. So
Yep.
I mean, each week is going to be themed around a specific area within our space. This one stays about partnerships, and if anyone knows Joe, then they'll know that he delivers a really great newsletter, one of the best, if not the best, newsletter in our space. And a lot of the stuff that we'll discuss today will have been shared there. But if you haven't seen it, then tune in because Joe's going to share some really cool and insightful details. So
Right.
everyone knows NVIDIA for chips, their stock
Hmm.
price, like they're clearly, and their CEO, like they're
Right.
clearly a high performing business.
Right.
What they may not necessarily know is the partnership with Schneider. So walk us through what that means in terms of the NVIDIA Schneider Electric relationship.
Yeah. So NVIDIA, everyone knows. Schneider, most people watching this will know. Schneider is a very significant controls business. They don't make their own HVAC equipment, but they do have controls. So the software systems, the on-prem hardware that is delivering temperatures, comfort in the buildings, and they also have a separate business that's very focused on electrical distribution. And actually, in data centers, to operate a data center, there's a lot of electricity being distributed, right? Because you have so much electricity being consumed, different racks, the cooling. I heard a good number that 40-45% of a data center's energy is the racks, 40-45% is the cooling, and then there's another 10 or so percent that is just other electrical demand, which so the two big pieces are delivery of power to run the data center, delivery of the or powering the cooling to keep them at the right temperature. So I chalk this up to a little bit of a picks and shovels approach where Schneider is trying to tell the story that we are playing and succeeding in data centers, partially because that's just a requirement right now. Any business that could in some way touch data centers wants to talk about it. Utilities, which are the suppliers of power, a lot of them are talking a lot about how they have plans to be able to fulfill the demand that data centers will cause. If you look at Eaton, which is also an electrical distribution business similar to Schneider in some ways, their stock has also gone very, very high. Vertiv is a cooling company spun out years ago, 5 or so years ago from Emerson. They also have seen huge increases just because people are looking at, I know data centers will be big. I think NVIDIA is the right call to be a key player. But what are the picks and shovels, right? During a gold rush, if you don't know where the gold mines are going to be, well, that people are going to need the picks and the shovels to go mine the gold mines. So that's a little bit the echoes of what I see from Schneider, and it fits well with what they're trying to accomplish. I think all of the peers of Schneider are telling a story around HVAC. JCI on a recent earnings call said about 15% of all revenue, when you net it out, is data centers. Carrier and Trane are making some announcements. They're making some investments, early stage investments. They're definitely partnering with some companies. So I think that we're going to continue to see these traditional businesses that we know very well, HVAC and controls, announcing
Yep.
various partnerships with chip manufacturers or the firms that are delivering the actual data center, operating it, and so forth.
Yeah, and just quickly before we move on to the next one, I think, and again, I don't have the data, you're in a far
Yeah,
better position for this, but given where real estate's at right now, data centers, and then maybe even healthcare as well, life science, they're the
yeah,
two industries where there is serious technology adoption happening, and they ultimately have the cash
yeah.
to burn. Did you get that, Joe?
It just you froze for a minute, but I think I got the gist of what you were saying. Yes, I would say refrigerated warehouses could be another one in that bucket. Warehouses in general are another hot market. So
Nice. Well, we'll have to see what happens there. Now, I don't know too much about this, so I'm keen to learn more on this myself. But we've spoken briefly about AVUITY and Normal.
yep,
There's a cool partnership happening there as well, right?
yeah. They I think it was AVUITY who made the announcement. So just to these are two smaller businesses that are less well known, obviously, than Schneider or NVIDIA. Normal is a very small business. They've been around for a couple of years, a startup, and I would put them generally in the independent data layer space. At the end of the day, they would describe themselves as an installer for software that you want to run on your building, and so they pull data from out of the building. They allow you to have kind of an integrated platform, and then other solutions, they expose data. You can write two ways. They provide some of the cybersecurity capabilities to allow that to happen. So the idea is, if you have a data source or you have a use case you support, you may find value in connecting to the on-premise systems, like the building automation system. Lighting controls would be another one. And that's where Normal can help. And the value to the owner of the building is they may not want to have an integration for every single application they're deploying, right? So think of somebody we would have met at Realcomm. They might be deploying
Yep.
space utilization software. They might have been deploying a CMMS product. They might have been deploying or have already deployed a energy management platform, a carbon management platform. So there's core data you need from the building to do all of those things. Instead of doing many different integrations, it's actually more logical to have one integration that everyone can use. So AVUITY, on the other side, they are a space utilization company. So what they provide between hardware and software is visibility into your building or buildings around where are the people, how many people, when do they come, where are they working, where are they not. And there's a lot of companies in this space. I remember a couple of years ago, I think I probably could have come up with a list of 20 or 30. I don't think there's quite that many. AVUITY is one that leans a little more on the corporations and the commercial real estate. But what they announced is they said, if we know where people in your building are, or if there are any people in your building by space, we can automate the HVAC system. And the idea there is don't heat or cool spaces that are unoccupied. Now, some owners and operators will say, well, I know on Fridays no one comes in, so I can change the building automation system at the building automation system level. But I would argue in some buildings, there will be more flexibility. People come in for a half a day. People sometimes come in on Thursdays, but sometimes don't come in on Thursdays. So being able to track that using AVUITY's technology and feeding that to the building automation system does have some savings. I've seen generally, and I'll stop in a moment, but generally you could get 25, 30% energy savings from HVAC optimization. I'm a little skeptical of that number being the average. I think that there are best case scenarios where you could realize that. However, some of these buildings are just very well managed, very well run, and so they're just not going to have the same opportunity to save. And there are still a lot of firms out there who say, I don't necessarily need to automate that. If I have the sensor data and I can review summary dashboards every week, every month, eventually I'm going to find on my own where I can change schedules. But this is an area where I'm hearing more and more on the space utilization side, companies saying, well, we want to automate HVAC. That's a very difficult thing to do on your own, especially if you're a smaller company, because as we both know, building automation systems are complicated. They could be old. They could be non-standard in a lot of ways, and Normal can help with that.
I like that. Would you say, just before we move on to the next one, would you say that we'll see more of that, or is that I assume there's platforms out there that also tie all of that in together as well.
Yeah. So I think there are other companies like Normal that I have just talked to them and they've said, yeah, we can support the HVAC optimization use case. I would say occupancy driven HVAC optimization or just HVAC optimization is the term of art I would use with what they are providing as an integrated solution. And yes, I do think we will see more and more companies do it. The open question for anyone listening that I would always have is, are you doing this on one building? Are you doing this at scale with many buildings? Are you doing this across many different vendors of building automation system and vintage, right? Because a 5-year-old JCI control system is not the same as integrating with a new JCI control system or a 10-year-old JCI control system. So there's a lot of complexity there. And I think sometimes firms don't realize how difficult that is, but working with a partner like a Normal outsources some of that challenge to somebody who's really an expert at doing it.
Great. So one of the other things we were going to discuss is Carrier and 75F.
Yep.
Carrier, obviously a large conglomerate within our space. I'd put them in one of the big four or five.
Yeah.
And then 75F, which is a really cool business. I was fortunate to have the founder a few years ago now, during COVID, join me on a webinar, so got to learn a lot about the business. And they're doing a lot of work together, and have announced what in the last 2 months a partnership.
Yeah, I think the partnership was actually announced at AHR, which is January, February. So it's maybe close to 6 months ago now. But they have launched Carrier a product called ClimaSite, and that is their light building control solution. So if you look at buildings, there are different types of HVAC that you use in different buildings. Hospitals will probably have chillers, a school, a university, chillers as well. They might even have district heating and cooling. That can be common for very large campuses. You get to a school like a K through 12 school, especially like an elementary school, you get to a retail site, you get to a restaurant, things like that. They may just have rooftop units on the roof, and they may have thermostats. And those thermostats may still be just the basic silly dumb thermostats that you might have in your home. So there's been a push to deploy connected thermostats, and that you can bundle that with services if you're a big company, and you can also bundle that with a cloud-based solution that provides energy data, energy management. And if you look at all of the big HVAC and controls companies, Siemens, Honeywell, JCI, Schneider, Trane, Carrier, those are the big ones. Daikin, I guess, would be the other one you could put in that bucket. Distech and Delta would be the next. They typically have a light building control solution. So something that is not a full-blown building automation system. You do not have hundreds, thousands of points. You might have dozens. And Carrier, I think, viewed this as an area where they wanted to be a little bit stronger. Carrier is the number one, at least in America, rooftop unit vendor. So if you look at the HVAC, they're typically the number one vendor there. So having the controls that you can bundle with the rooftops makes sense. JCI years ago, 5 or so years ago, launched a product called Verisys. Also at AHR, Schneider had launched a new solution. Siemens has acquired Site Controls in Europe. They kind of is in this category, but they also own Site Controls, which is a business they bought 10 plus years ago. Honeywell had bought Novar, which I think that was almost 20 years ago now. So they all have various levels of sophistication here. But all of those companies, I think, see light commercial, small commercial buildings as an opportunity simply because it's less fragmented. You think of it's not, I mean, there's some fragmentation, but it's a lot less fragmented than the large commercial buildings where you have hundreds, you could argue you have hundreds of vendors. So they wanted to have a product here. The only other thing I'll say about Carrier, they used to be part of United Technologies, which had 3 businesses. It was a aviation and kind of defense business. It was a Otis elevator business, and then it was the Carrier business, Carrier, and then Automated Logic, and then some security. Carrier has been spun out. Otis has been spun out. They're completely independent companies. The rest of that business now then merged with Raytheon. It's Raytheon Technologies. But Carrier has been selling its security and fire life safety businesses. They used to have a wider range of controls products. And I see this as just they're doubling down on the HVAC story, the control story across really residential up to large commercial. And one gap that they probably saw in their line card was light commercial controls. And 75F, not to forget them, they have a pretty strong product. It's wireless. It's easy to deploy. It has some of the more modern capabilities that you would find in cloud-based software. They also sell pretty successfully, from everything I've seen, through distribution. So they don't necessarily call the owner of the buildings, think of a restaurant chain, they might call the distributors and the integrators, and that's how most controls products are sold. So they're one of the first that I've seen smaller companies that has done a good job, and Carrier has a lot of different channels to market, direct, indirect, that they can sell through. So I think their product physically is the 75F gear. It's just I think they use blue instead of orange. 75F's main color is orange. But if you look at it, it's the same thing. And there have been some press releases where they say powered by 75F, but they're really, most of what they're promoting is just their new cloud-based small commercial building offering.
I think that one in particular is one that I'm going to keep a close eye on, because I think that could be a really successful partnership.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot to be said of the larger HVAC companies, controls companies selling. They just have much more market power, market penetration to sell. And if you make those partnerships work, you as a smaller entity, you can end up with a pretty successful channel of business.
Good stuff. So final two. I saw it the other day, CBRE and Climate X. What's going on there? Because this is slightly different to the last three we've spoken about.
Yeah, so the next two, I mean, there's two partnerships with one company that we'll talk about next, but climate risk assessments are becoming a bigger issue if you're an owner of or investor in a real estate asset. And that's typically bigger buildings where there's questions of what impact is this having on climate? What is there a plan to decarbonize the asset or reduce the carbon emissions of the asset? What are the risks around sea level rise? And a lot of the people who are getting those questions would be the CBREs of the world, who are helping as a broker with the transactions. So CBRE has a few different businesses. One, they are the broker. So if you go to talk to a realtor to buy a house, if you're buying a building, a larger building, office building, you go to CBRE or others. They're not the only ones. And this question is coming up of just, if we as a investor in your fund invest in this building being acquired, we want to know what are the climate risks. So this idea of a climate risk assessment is becoming is becoming a part in some cases of the overall diligence process, right? If you're buying a new building, you probably do an inspection. You probably want to figure out how old are all the key systems, the base building systems, even more visual things. How old is the lobby? Do we need to upgrade the lobby? And when you're underwriting that asset, you're saying, well, here's the money we need to spend in the next 3, 5, 8 years over that hold period to improve it. And we believe if we do that, rents will go up, occupancy will go up. So you can tell a story, you can tell kind of a thesis there, but the climate risk assessment piece is becoming part of that. So in CBRE they develop their own technology, but they're a large entity like a lot of these large controls companies. They're not always going to build everything in-house. So this partnership is really, as I see it, allowing them to go to the buyers of real estate and say, we can help you with that climate risk assessment. We're already probably helping you with the transaction anyway. I could see them coming in after a building that has been built. They're the facility management vendor of record, and maybe they also want to do a climate risk assessment.
I really like Climate X. I saw a post, I think it was earlier this week, where the CEO and founder has recently moved to New York, and I've been following them for some time. It seems to be a really big trend. There's
absolutely
a lot of new companies getting some traction within climate risk.
Yeah, I think, and it might be stronger in Europe, or Europe might be a little bit ahead of the curve, but I don't think that the U.S. is that far behind, at least in certain regions. You could argue maybe the U.S. is a little bit more bifurcated, some states, some areas. But also, I was at an event this week that was focused on sustainability in real estate. One point that was made was, if we're buying a building anywhere in America, if the investors are European, they will say, we need a climate risk, or we're not participating in that investment, or we don't think you should buy that building. So there's that indirect influence even beyond what is required by that locality or that state or that country.
Interesting. So the final one, and it's about Measurabl, and I've seen quite a few press releases coming out over the last few weeks, and in your newsletter, half of it could have actually been about Measurabl's upcoming and latest partnerships. So they're obviously trying to grow out the EU more. What else are they doing with the partnerships?
Yeah, so they have a partnership with Susteco. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but they're part of Bosch or Bosch. Bosch is interesting. Bosch actually is a little bit like an ABB in that they have a lot of capabilities around building controls. They have a lot of capabilities around HVAC. They aren't as well known in the US market, but you go to Europe and they have building automation systems like ABB. They have a lot of capabilities. They own in America, they own Climatech, which is more of an energy services business, an integrator. They deploy, they don't make at least the climate tech business doesn't really make its own HVAC, but they deploy other HVAC equipment. And they're seeing with their penetration in Europe, they're seeing ESG data as just being a bigger and bigger piece. Like a lot of these large companies, they're usually okay partnering with subject matter experts or specific solutions to really have the fundamental data management platform, which is what Measurabl provides. So it's kind of a win for Measurabl. It's a way to get more into the European market. And then it's also a win for the Bosch entity in that they have a ESG capability that they can bring up. So do you want to talk about the other partnership?
Yeah, the one with Preqin.
Yeah, I think it's Preqin, but it might be Preqin. But regardless, they're basically a data platform for private investors. And when you look at just what kinds of data do you want as a private investor, a lot of it's performance data. What are the valuations? What are the multiples? But private investors are more and more interested in ESG and sustainability data. And Measurabl is one of the larger entities. Maybe they have the largest database of just performance and energy and ESG performance and sustainability performance of real estate assets. So if you are Preqin, you're looking for sources of data to say, well, we know that building's performance. Is that good? Is that bad? And Measurabl can provide some of that data. There have been a number of announcements over the past, I would say, maybe a year or two, where Measurabl has certainly leaned into this of, we do provide a software solution to you, the owner of the real estate. We help you with your GRESB report. We help you with all the other reports that go on every year. We help you with data accuracy, automating the data process. But they're also looking at who else needs aggregated data. I don't think that through this platform or this partnership, they're going to say, well, you can go in and find this individual building's scores. But if those clients wanted to make that clear, I think there would be a technical mechanism to do it. So that's that. They're trying to use their data. A lot of companies over the years have talked to this. They're trying to use the data they've collected over years across millions of square feet, more than millions of square feet, to give a good read on what is average performance, what is good performance, what is bad performance as it relates to real estate assets.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty savvy partnership, to be honest, because everyone, even at Realcomm, I'm sure when you went to that conference last week, or at the beginning of this week, sorry, they were talking about it, but everyone's crying out for more data, to pull the data out of buildings and how to utilize that data. So that's really interesting. Cool. Well, we wanted to keep this under 25 minutes. I think we've done a really good job this time, Joey.
Yep. And I think our plan is to keep these pretty formulaic, right? The newsletter has different categories every month. We'll talk through some of the selected news items. And I think we're moving next week to Tuesday, which, we had both been traveling a little bit. So Friday was the only day we could do this week. We didn't want to take 2 weeks off because last week was 4th of July. But moving forward, it'll be Tuesday, 3 p.m. England time, or Greenwich Mean Time, British, 4 p.m. in Europe. And then for me, 8 a.m., 7 a.m. in the Pacific time zone. So you guys can get up early to watch.
There we go. I mean, you just stole my limelight. There's no point in being here. But yeah, I love this one. Technical difficulties out of the way, making some good momentum. And we'll put down in the follow-up Joe's details, my details. If you want to follow up and learn more about each other, please do so. But we'll see you next week on Tuesday. And Joe, get some rest, as I know you've been traveling quite a bit.
Yeah. Thanks. We'll talk next week. Thanks, everyone, for joining.